Let's have more in our top story now. And Taliban militants have mounted a multi-pronged attack on the Afghan capital. A spokesman for the Afghan Interior Ministry says there was a strong response from security forces.
The Taliban, they still have sanctuaries and safe havens across the Afghan border. And we have a long border in which they can cross illegally in most cases. But again, yet, after so many efforts that they did, they faced a strong resistance. And the Afghan police force and the national force, they were quick in reaction, and they were very quick to control them and squeeze them in those positions that they had attacked. Fortunately, we have a very small number of casualties. And that's why, because the Afghan forces now know how to control these insurgents if they come at large. So this was a great, this was a great opportunity for the Afghan forces to kill these insurgents.
Well, for more, the BBC's journalist Bilal Sarwary joins us now from Afghanistan via webcam. Good morning. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us. What's the latest of the situation in Kabul?
Well, as we speak, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. The attack started 1 in the afternoon. Afghan officials are telling us that suicide attackers, possibly between 4 to 5, are holding in 2 different locations. The one location is not very far from where I'm talking to you in Wazir Khan in central Kabul. The second location is a building not very far from the country's parliament in West Kabul, where gunfire and loud explosions have been heard. As I've been speaking to a number of residents who say it's too difficult to fall asleep because the noise of explosions and gunfire is too disturbing, especially for children.
So there's obviously a very high level of coordination related to these attacks. What does this say about how organised and how lethal the Taliban still is?
Well, it shows how potent a threat they remain, although we're being told often by Afghan and Western officials that the Taliban have lost the ability to launch large-scale attacks. But the more serious question that is being asked here in Afghanistan is it is a major intelligence failure. At least that's how some of the members of parliament are putting it. And Afghans are very accident-driven people. Every time an attack like this happens, every time the insurgents are able to get inside the city of Kabul with large amounts of weapons, rocket-propelled grenades and heavy machine guns, their confidence in the Afghan National Security Forces will be shattered. I think that's one of the many negative impacts. There are still many unanswered questions. How did the attackers got inside the city, into the heart of Kabul, where the British, German, U.S. embassies are located, as well as the NATO headquarters?
And so, Bilal Sarwary, what does it also say about the Afghan security forces and their ability to go it alone?
Well, the Afghan National Security Forces were very swift to respond. It has to be said that it was all the Afghans, although NATO was there, but not in the lead role. NATO may have helped in 1 or 2 occasions, but it is a huge intelligence failure. I think the Afghan National Security Forces are still in their very infant stages. You have to remember that 10 years ago, Afghanistan didn't have an army, didn't have police, didn't have intelligence. What it shows that Afghanistan will continue to rely heavily on NATO and international forces, and the insurgency is a continuous threat to the Afghan people as well as to the Afghan government, especially as the so-called fighting season approaches. This is summer. This is when the snow melts, the mountain passes are open, and it's easy to move around the country's provinces and mountainous valleys, especially on the border with Pakistan.
The Taliban says this is the start of its spring offensive. Are we likely to see more attacks in Kabul?
Well, you have to remember Kabul is the heart of the political power. The insurgents have always tried desperately at times to attack it because, as one Afghan official said, even if you fire a single bullet in Kabul, you're guaranteed international headlines. There are many worries, there are many fears. People said that the Taliban and various other insurgent groups had been defeated, that they were simply not able to launch large-scale attacks. But today's attacks is a grim reminder, in many ways a worry for the Afghan government as well as for the international community. because 2014 is seen as a date where international forces want to withdraw because they think that the Afghans are able to deal with the threat. And they also said that the insurgency had been defeated. And today's attacks, I think, would make the job of many Western leaders also difficult, who will find it difficult to convince many people, including Afghans as well as their own nations, that it was a job done and that the Western forces could go back to their countries.
You've already said that this is being seen as a major intelligence failure. What else is the Afghan government saying to international governments about this attack?
Well, the Afghan government is simply not happy to face a number of uncomfortable questions. The Afghan government at this stage is putting this as a success story. It says, look, it doesn't matter how many insurgents got in, civilians were not killed. The Afghan National Security Forces were able to deal with that. But what some Afghans, especially those in the parliament, are saying, that transition has failed. What this shows is that Afghanistan still needs international support. The international forces could go back to their countries, some of those parliamentarians say, only if the Taliban are defeated. Afghans are also very critical of neighboring Pakistan. Many people are saying that until and unless the sanctuaries are not closed, until and unless the supply routes are not closed on the other side of the border, Afghanistan will continue to face a lot of these challenges.
And just quickly and finally, Bilal Sarwary, where does this leave the talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government? There had been some progress on that in recent months.
Well, I was speaking to a presidential aide who's very close to the president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, and he said, look, this is the group of Taliban or insurgents who are never in support of peace talks. These are the people who want these peace talks to fail. But many Afghans, especially women rights activists, have said there's no need to talk to a group that's simply not interested in talks, and they've shown that they're interested in killing Afghans. So let's not talk to them. Let's focus on other areas.
Bilal Sarwary, thank you very much for the update.